Well, we'll go ahead and do some introductions first. If you want to maybe go to the next slide, I think we have, here we go. So my name is Lael Hester. I'm a solutions architect with Cyxtera. I work very closely with our operations team led by Mr. Sullivan here, David as well, and also all of our customers too. So I have kind of a unique perspective in being able to, really observe and help our clients and their deployments and the management of their environments. And then also working with Kelly and his team. And Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, yeah. Kelly Sullivan. I run the data centers. We have about 62 globally with about 400 staff members, about half and half facilities or IT operations. And so we've basically been, dealing with the pandemic here globally, which is very unique. Go ahead, Lael.
Thank you, Kelly. Just want to, speaking of the pandemic, and there's been a lot of focus and appreciation for the frontline workers, which is well deserved. And Kelly and his team, they are the frontline workers of our entire company. So we wouldn't be able to do what we do and offer the services and support to our large client base without the support of Kelly and his team. So I'm very grateful for that. We always try to bring that up. And you look at the type of businesses that we have in the data centers and the type of workloads and applications, and a lot of the systems that we all kind of take for granted today, things like web meeting platforms, for example, are actually hosted in a data center somewhere. So it's very important to be able to, keep not just the lights on, but keep that infrastructure powered on, available, connectivity to those environments. And we'll talk about the demands that we've seen on the technical environments and on the personnel as well too. So the agenda here, we'll talk about the factors to consider. We're looking at migrating IT, just as Jason mentioned earlier. Cloud repatriation has been a big trend. There's another interesting trend we'll talk about in terms of office-based private corporate data centers. Connectivity is super important to everyone. What will we all do right now without internet connectivity? And then ways to stay safe and stay connected in this new normal world that we have. So a quick bit about Cyxtera as a company. We are a global data center provider. We're the largest privately held data center provider in the world, and I think the third largest retail co-location provider now. So large footprint, as Kelly mentioned, over 60 data centers, very large presence in North America. We have 3 different campuses in the Los Angeles area, El Segundo, Burbank, and Irvine. So a lot of different spaces there. I believe that's where Kelly's located too. And we're always looking at different areas to expand into. We want to make sure that we have capacity to provide to these workloads, no matter where our clients need to be and when too. So a lot of expansion happening. Next slide, please. Here we go. All right, so some of the questions that we're looking at that are kind of driving the trends that we see today are around what to do when the office buildings that house these corporate data centers are hard to access or inaccessible. People are quarantined, there's a stay-at-home order. We're also we're going to talk about how to access your workloads and your applications and get that performance that you're used to when you're either in the data center or in a corporate office. I think most people are used to having a really fast internet connection, if not being able to go and touch your hardware and make configuration changes. How do you do that from your house or your apartment? Number 3, how reliable is your residential internet? That's incredibly important, especially for doing things like video conversations, for example. And then remote work, the work from home initiative, increasing security risks, people just not being experienced with how to lock down their environment, phishing attacks are up. And then staying connected to corporate culture is very important as well, and staying connected to people in general. So we'll talk about some migration considerations here. Overall, there's the challenge of accessing these workloads the, accessibility, the reliability. There's been power outages in California due to the fires and the droughts and the temperatures. So there's just a lot going on right now. And then of course, COVID-19, the social movement has added some uncertainty to certain areas as well too. So we're looking at, capacity constraints. It's incredible how many of our clients have reached out saying, I need more bandwidth throughput. We need more power. We're going to be deploying more servers and storage arrays to our environment, so to consolidate, because we know you have a reliable platform. So how are we going to, support those requirements? One of the things we've done too to make things more accessible, and again, more kudos to Kelly and the operations team. Gold support, smart hands, remote hands is something that anyone who's ever been around a data center environment is familiar with. It's where you can submit a ticket and put a description of what you need done to your servers, to your infrastructure, and then someone from Kelly's team will actually go and do that for you, so you don't have to drive a long way into the data center and go through the very rigorous security protocols of getting into the facilities. We've always had very strict security protocols, and of course with COVID, those have only been enhanced. We're doing everything possible to keep both our employees safe and also our clients. So we have some screening measures. We're doing some really cool stuff with virtual data center tours, which we can talk about. But there is quite a unique challenge posed today. Next slide, please. So current trends, and Jason alluded to this a little bit earlier, it's around workloads and applications moving off-prem. So we saw in that Uptime Institute report, the private corporate enterprise data centers that are in office buildings or separate facilities managed by individual companies, the projected trend is for that to decrease fairly significantly. So workloads are moving what we call off-prem, so out of the corporate environment, into a multi-tenant data center or a co-location facility, such as the Cyxtera facilities. So there are a lot of reasons that we see that happening. And some of them are accessibility, reliability, cost, performance control. We hear a lot about companies trying to focus on what their mission is and their strategy. And it's very hard to maintain and operate data centers. It's very expensive to do that. It is not an easy task to undertake. So companies are realizing, hey, outsourcing to specialists, especially in the data center world, makes a lot of sense, right? These facilities are purpose-built enterprise class data centers. They go through rigorous certification and upkeep to make sure that power is resilient. There's a lot of really industrial grade universal power supplies and generators. Connectivity is brought in diversely through different fiber vaults, all sorts of different network technologies. And then of course, cloud repatriation too. I think people are realizing that, hey, we had this big cloud first initiative. A lot of workloads, applications do great in the public cloud. But again, back to that Uptime report that we saw earlier, half of enterprise businesses and local state governments are saying, well, wait a minute, I would never trust my mission critical data in the public cloud. What's that going to look like? How is it secure? What's the performance? People move applications to AWS, and sometimes it works great, and sometimes like, well, wait a minute, why does my invoice keep on going up? Shadow IT is a big concern. So the trend is to move applications off-prem, and either some to the public cloud, but a lot going into the multi-tenant data centers, such as the Cyxtera facilities. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we're seeing data center providers support this repatriation from the cloud and the emigration of workloads and applications from their own private data centers is, how do you still innovate? How do you leverage the scalability and the global availability of the public cloud, but yet maintain control, performance, security, A lot of people like to be able to say, yep, there's my server, there's my storage array, I know where it is, I can go in and touch it if I need to. So enterprise bare metal is it's becoming very popular now. It's kind of a hybrid IT strategy. It's not cloud, and it's not owned infrastructure. So what we're doing is we're partnering with the names you see here. Nutanix is the leader in the hyperconverged infrastructure space. They do a lot with virtual desktop, which we'll talk about. HPE, very, very common in the enterprise space, and their ProLiant series servers. I'm sure a lot of people here are very familiar with the ProLiant DL 380s, 360s. Fujitsu, they're big in EMEA and Asia Pac, but making more of a shift into North America. And then of course, NVIDIA. I think that we've all heard of NVIDIA. Originally, our familiarity was around the gaming platforms and graphical processing units and machine learning and artificial intelligence. So they're doing some really cool stuff. And artificial intelligence is really creeping into more and more aspects of our lives, right? We see self-driving cars and the Internet of Things and smart refrigerators. Machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, is even being deployed in the radiology industry, and where they're using these supercomputers to analyze x-rays that used to take doctors sometimes days to get around to read and then communicate back to you and then bill you for. So computers are now able to go and look at these x-rays and recognize certain patterns and identify a potential tumor or something well before the human eye can recognize it too. So artificial intelligence is huge. Deep learning, machine learning, and NVIDIA is really the leader in that space. Their share price right now, their market cap is doing really well. I think they're even bigger than like AMD and Intel right now. So we're doing some cool stuff in offering their services on a subscription basis, and it makes it really easy for customers or for businesses that want to get out of their own private data center, which is an expensive proposition, right? Instead of having to spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on hardware, maybe they can spend some of that money on personnel instead. And it's all an operating cost to a data center provider like Cyxtera, where we leverage kind of a shared platform and then provide these dedicated appliances, dedicated servers to an individual prospect, individual partner. And it makes it much easier for businesses to adopt newer technology. You don't need $1 million to be able to take advantage of graphical processing units anymore. So we're trying to make it easy to adopt new technology, to make this radical shift from the on-prem corporate data center into our facilities, and also leverage industry-leading technologies at the same time. Next slide here. I mentioned VDI before, so virtual desktop infrastructures. That's one of the most common things that people are using hyperconverged infrastructure for, and enterprise bare metal platforms. With everyone working from home, I think most of us are issued corporate laptops. Maybe we have something old lying around the house, but hardware is expensive, and especially when people are at home, it can be hard to maintain. A lot of people don't know how to just manage their PC, for example. So you could create this virtual desktop environment where the operating system is hosted in a data center, and someone just logs in over the internet to their own private desktop, and they have their own personalized environment, but they can access it from any device, whether it be a tablet or a smartphone or an old laptop or a Chromebook. So you don't need a whole lot of processing power on the individual laptop or computer, and you don't need a whole lot of connectivity. You don't need much storage. All of that is housed in an enterprise class data center. All you need is your internet connection and some sort of terminal to access it, and you can do your job from pretty much anywhere. So that's a pretty cool way to enable the whole work from home initiative. Next slide, David. Awesome, excellent. So for this part, I will turn it over to our resident expert, Mr. Kelly Sullivan.
Thank you, Lael. I appreciate the kudos earlier. You know, really, it's all the guys on the ground that are doing all the work. You know, even myself, I'm working virtual, so it's all the guys at the sites that are working in an essential capacity and keeping all the customers up and running. So really appreciate them. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, kind of what the pandemic meant to us, and I'll try to keep it quick because I know we're running late. You know, we had no idea what to expect. You know, we were hearing the news reports and you know, in February, and didn't mean a lot, right? We hadn't heard of any cases really, at least that affected our sites. And then come March, it kind of all blew up. We saw in 1 week, we saw several cases, mostly vendors, customers of vendors or security guards, and that was in different areas: New Jersey, hotspot, you know, Seattle, California, just a few different areas where that was kind of the tip of the iceberg of, okay, this is real. You know, it's not all just BS, which, you know, we were all kind of wondering, is it media hype? What is it? It was real. You know, we have a pandemic plan, but no one can prepare for this. So it wasn't close. But the one thing that'll come out of this is we'll have a much better plan now. So I think, you know, what we did is we stood up a task force, and we had to address every incident that came up and basically track it, kind of like the CDC or others would do as far as tracking the movements of personnel and see if anyone was affected. And we found that we were going to have to, you know, really limit the data center staff to be the only people that go in that center and essential customers. So we did that. We put out a communication to customers and employees, and we said, hey, you know, only essential people. We basically kicked out our office staff because we have lots of offices within our data centers, and we kicked them out and made everybody work from home. And customers were real good too because they were feeling it. So they you know, they were already seeing cases themselves, and so they pretty much all cooperated, and they just let, you know, people that were essential come in. We started doing health screenings, and so as a bunch of questions, you know, we didn't get into taking temperatures and all that yet, but it was really just a question, or sorry, a series of questions, asking them if they had been around anyone, how do they feel, and so on. And then if any of the questions were no, they got in. But if they were yes, then they would be questioned and possibly not let in. The other thing we did is we didn't know if we were going to have personnel stranded in the center. So we added additional food supply and water, which we already had, but we just didn't know when things were starting to you know, kind of go haywire. We added additional cleaning protocols so that not only did we have our cleaning personnel come in, but we had our DC Ops staff doing regimented cleaning. They're still doing it because it hasn't gone away, as you all know. And then we created separate entrances so that not everywhere, but wherever we could, from customers and our employees. So we created segregation. That was another thing we did. And we were just trying to keep as many people separate as we could. Go ahead, David. And then we have seen a uptick in customers that saw accelerated growth from people working virtual. And so it was kind of two different ways. We either had customers that were hunkering down and saying, I'm not touching anything, right? We don't want human error. We don't want anybody in a cage. But we had others that were experiencing so much growth, they were shipping, you know, servers to us and saying, can you please rack these 20 servers in the next 2 days, and wire them up, right? So they would wire them up and then keep them going. And that's where, you know, I think people really saw the value of having a data center and having a staff that's there and ready to work remotely, which is, perfect for this business, right? So go ahead, David. And for the future, I see it already with our company, and Diane, you're spot on about people working, not necessarily working from offices anymore, right? I think that people will still need to get together. I miss it. You'll need to travel on occasion, but we're looking already at reducing office space where we just have dedicated offices and not data centers. And do we really need it? Right? It's a huge expense, and it's people are working, right? The work is getting done for the most part, and I think it's to be determined somewhat. But so far so good. The other thing we kind of learned is we put a lot of the staff who's on this call listening on A and B shifts to keep more separation, so that if one team was impacted by COVID, the other team wouldn't, because they had to clean their way out and have a separation of time. That's another thing that worked in other beneficial ways, where we think we're actually getting more work out of people by having them spreading shifts. And then, but as far as the social interaction, I kind of mentioned that's the one, that's the one piece that we miss here is the social interaction, which that's what I miss from not going into the office. But I do think that once I had started having my staff go virtual and actually buy video cameras, and which were very expensive, by the way, because that's what everybody was doing, right? Everybody, you couldn't get a good Logitech camera for the longest time. But we all went virtual. When we started actually having video like we do now, it was much better than an audio call, right? You felt much closer to being together. And I noticed a difference in how the staff was responding to me. So that was good. I think, David, I pretty much touched on everything here. Unless, Lael, you have something on that, but I know we're running late, so thank you. Back to Lael.
Yeah, I know we're short on time, so we're gonna skip through. Let's go. Yeah, just so real quick here.
You get about 5 minutes, so take your time.
Okay. All right. Great. So I pulled some data just from on internet connectivity and the cable providers in particular, very relevant working from home. Overall, the backbone networks of these providers have been holding up very well. It's the edge of the networks in certain neighborhoods in particular. Do you have fiber to the node, fiber to the home? How old is the copper infrastructure in your neighborhood? That really dictates whether or not you're going to have a decent experience working from home. And of course, Wi-Fi as opposed to using your cellular connection is a much better way to do that. So we've seen an interesting shift in the time frames that people are using the internet. And then we've also seen some really interesting trends in the increase in both downstream and upstream traffic. And let's just, for the sake of time, let's go to the aggregate slide here, David. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we'll build this out. So let's look at the growth trends here in California. Downstream increased 18%, upstream increased 40%, more than double the increase of downstream. Why is that? The traditional methodology for using the internet is to stream things to us. We're streaming Netflix, we're listening to music, we're downloading movies, we're downloading files. So when we pivoted to this work from home environment, those trends didn't change too much. We're all on more video calls and more audio calls over the internet, which means we're also uploading more data. The bandwidth that we need for this type of interaction is much higher than just sending emails and sending files back and forth. So for the most part, in the past, we weren't uploading a lot of data to the network. But now with the video calls and audio, video being the #1 bandwidth hog, audio probably being #2, aside from CAD programs and so forth, computer aided design. But we see a huge increase in network uploads compared to downloads, because overall, even though we're doing video conferences and that requires video being brought to us, it's a smaller percentage of increase because we were streaming Netflix and ESPN and Spotify and Pandora to begin with. And we're still doing all of that as well too. So we wanted to show you, California being a very tech savvy state, it was one of the highest states in the country for an increase, especially in the upstream. But look at Arizona, right? A lot of the data centers are in the Phoenix area. This is all residential use, but still the upstream growth for Arizona and Phoenix and Tucson actually was higher from a percentage increase basis than for California as well too. And then we wanted to compare that to the national average. So again, California, Arizona, much higher from an upstream bandwidth incremental use percentage-wise than the national average. It's fairly easy to predict where you're going to see the higher states, on the coast. New York was high, Massachusetts, but California really had one of the largest increases in upstream bandwidth growth in particular too. So internet connectivity, very, very important to work from home and for businesses too. When you're going to host your website or host your web meeting conference platform in a data center, it is critically important to have multiple ways of accessing that platform. So interconnectivity needs to be reliable, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be diverse. Physically diverse connectivity into the data center is incredibly important. So we work very closely with the internet service providers, our network service provider, carrier partners, to make sure that they have diverse fiber routes coming in from different sides of the building, different streets. We have diverse meeting rooms and fiber vaults in the data centers. So interconnectivity resiliency is very important. We work with over 240 network service providers globally and have almost 700 discrete networks in the data centers. We continually try to bring in new providers as well too, so we have over 17 now. Security and compliance. Everyone is concerned about security and compliance. We hear about data breaches all the time. There are these extremely public cases like with Target and Home Depot, where it costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Nobody wants to be the next globally recognized data breach, right? So what can we all do as employees and digital citizens to make sure that we're not the next victim? We're seeing significant increase in phishing attacks, and they have become very complex in terms of how they're being sent to us. I get emails all the time from Apple and Netflix and Amazon, companies who I do business with all the time. I order stuff from Amazon all the time. Oh, my Netflix account was hacked. What? You want me to click here and enter my name and address and credit card information on the account? No one's ever going to send you a request for your personal credentials, but those attacks are increasing. Wi-Fi security. Make sure you change the password on your router. Anytime you can use two-factor authentication with the cell phone device as well, try to use that on your work applications. And also VPNs. If you have the ability to use a virtual private network to connect back into your corporate environment or to connect your employees and your colleagues to those applications, highly recommended using some sort of VPN or software-defined perimeter. It's becoming very, very popular these days as well. And then next slide here, David. Quick summary, we talked about co-locating essential workloads, the cloud repatriation initiative, and the trend of moving workloads off-prem into the data centers, virtual desktop infrastructure or VDI, one of the main technologies that people are deploying to enable work from home securely. The importance of a reliable high-speed internet connection can't be overstated. I'm sure we all understand that one. Security and compliance for remote workers. Again, there are certain basic things we can do to kind of lock down those environments. And then, making sure that people do have a safe and secure physical environment too, in terms of their ability to socially distance and to isolate when necessary, which brings us to number 6, information technology enabling people to stay connected. it's great that we can do things like this and we can see each other and be here on video chats and in video conferences. Companies are getting rid of their office spaces. Travel is going to be drastically reduced, and there are great ways to cut costs and save money, and we all are getting used to doing our jobs remotely. But at the same time, it's really, I think, bringing to people's forefront how important it is to see people. And Kelly mentioned earlier too, just the social interaction, the professional interaction, collaborating with the people, in the same building, in the same room, having that personal connection with people. It's hard to stay in touch with certain people when you do only see them virtually too. So technology's been great. I'm very thankful for my webcam and to be able to do this, but I think like most of us, I miss my colleagues and my friends, and look forward to being able to get back and all be together in person again. And that's all we have.